screen. Hello everyone. I thank you for that introduction. I'm hoping James behaves pretty well, but he's my traveling companion, so he's an old hat at this. He's been doing it since before he was born. So perhaps he'll provide some comic relief or cover up when I make mistakes. So I know that you've had a number of speakers into North Dakota talk about Common Core, and so the issue that I know most about is the data aspect. So I was one of the first people to read through the approximately 1,200-page contract agreements between the Common Core testing organizations and the federal government, and what I found was a lot of really exciting information that I'm going to share with you tonight. But I wanted to start by telling a couple of stories because you know, if you read newspapers, magazines, and so forth, everyone's talking about big data, how it's ubiquitous, how it's powerful, the Internet of Things. There's a lot of kind of phrases that people pass around, but it's really hard to kind of visualize it because it hasn't, you know how technology works. It slowly trickles into society until all of a sudden it's everywhere, like cell phones. I mean, when I went to college, I didn't bring a cell phone until my parents made me get one after our brother had a car accident. They couldn't reach me all day long because I was at the library studying. And that wasn't really that long ago, and now everybody everywhere has a cell phone. In fact, my husband and I don't even have a non-cell phone. We just use our cell phones. It's most convenient. There's no reason to have a home phone for us. My parents came to visit over Christmas time. My parents live in Wisconsin. I grew up in Wisconsin on the family farm. My dad's a farmer. And so he was telling me about a friend who bought a brand new 2014 F-250 pickup truck. And so one day his friend turned on the truck, and it started up, and this mechanical voice said to him, "You have 3 more starts. After 3 more starts, your car will only run at 15 miles an hour until you get a checkup." There were, the car, something electronic was telling it that it needed, so something was wrong with its emissions system. So he was really puzzled by that. He turned off the car, he thought, well, maybe something's wrong. Turned it on again, it says, "You have 2 starts remaining before this car moves only at 15 miles an hour before you go get the emissions system checked." And it was not kidding. So he turned it off. I don't know why he was this dumb, but he turned it off and turned it on again, and it says, "You have 1 start remaining before it only moves." So he literally could not go anywhere with his F-250 brand new pickup unless he was going 15 miles an hour until he brought that thing in to have somebody check out the emissions system. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't really appreciate being held prisoner by my own car. And I'm not an anti-technology person. In fact, I hate driving cars, and I'm really going to be excited when those self-driving cars come out so that it can take me everywhere I want to go while I read. We used to live in Washington, D.C., and the thing that I loved the most about it was the train system. You get on the metro, 40 minutes ride to work, walk 2 blocks, reading the whole way, checking email, whatever else. Highly convenient. The only thing I'm worried about is putting my kids in that thing and telling it to take them to soccer practice and then them hacking it and having it, take them somewhere else. And I have no idea where they are when I think they're at soccer practice for the next 2 hours. You can find stories like this all the time, and because it's kind of a passion of mine, I kind of collect these odd stories. Of course technology can do wonderful things. I don't know if you've seen that nowadays they can make, prosthetic limbs. They can make prosthetic limbs that exactly match, say there's a little boy who needed a hand. Have you heard of them 3D printing? You know what 3D printing is, right? They can make a plastic, you basically have like a mini manufacturing center in your house. They 3D print houses, but they can 3D print hands. There's this little boy, I think it was in Africa, they take a scan of his hand that he has, feed it to the computer, and it spits out, a mirror image for the hand that he doesn't have. Fits him like a glove, and not only that, it's inexpensive enough for his family to be able to afford it. So it's really, there's some really wonderful, wonderful things about technology. He doesn't have to have, clunky prosthetic that he has to walk around with and be embarrassed by. That little boy, it can grow with him, and his family doesn't have to spend their entire savings to get their child a more normal life, and so forth. So that's really exciting. But what also is not exciting is there's basically, it's a double-edged sword like everything is, right? So as these things come up, basically we need to be aware of the dangers that come with having all these wonderful technological things and not be blinded by the shiny things and just be swallowing dangerous things wholesale. So I don't know if you have watched the Spider-Man movies, you've heard ad nauseum, with great power comes great responsibility, and I think that's really the case with technology. Technology gives us a lot of extra power. It kind of heightens the things that we're able to do, but what it really needs to accompany it, to make it safe, to make it us able to use technology wisely, we have to have a growing increase in responsibility. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. So for example, cell phones, nowadays you can break down in the middle of nowhere and you can have someone come bring you gas instead of, staying overnight or trudging up, well, around here in North Dakota, man, you'd have to trudge 20 miles perhaps to the next exit. So you can call somebody up and say, rescue me, but at the same time you can also, spend your whole entire life playing solitaire glued to your phone. But when you have the ability to do both of those things, you are the one who has to make the decision what you're going to do with the power that you have, with the tools that you have. And so right now I'm going to argue that we're not doing a very good job being responsible for the power that we have with technology. And obviously, since we're talking about education, I'm going to focus talking about some of the things inside schools. So this is Nevada dad John Eppolito. He's an acquaintance of mine. He appeared on Fox News a couple of months ago because he went to his local public school and he said, I would like to see the information that you have about my kids. I just want to see my kids' file. So a couple months later, they got back to him and said, that'll cost you $10,000, please. So he was just doing a public information record. So what they basically told him is, we have so much information on your kids, and it's in so many different agencies, that it would take, a number of people so much time to go collect it, we have to pay them for our time, that the bill to you is $10,000. So obviously he raised to think about that, and his complaint is, of course, we have all these people who are collecting information about your kids and sending it, this, that, and the other where, but again, like, who owns the children, who owns, their thoughts, who owns their behaviors, who owns all these records about them, and should it be passed around without parents' knowledge, without the individual's knowledge or their consent? I don't think so. Neither does he. So this is a mom, obviously Colorado mom, Cherry Kaiseker. She's one of the, there's these grassroots moms and dads all over the country thinking about Common Core, about data privacy. And so she's been leading the charge in her state to get data privacy laws passed. And so she says, it seems crazy to me that complete strangers and vendors can have access to my children's data, but I cannot. She went to her school district, again, asked to say, I just want to see what you have about my own child, over whom, by the way, I am the legal guardian. And they said, you can't have that. So it's just a weird kind of situation for a parent, to go to their local school district that they paid for, where they send their own precious children, and to be told, basically, this is ours, this is not yours, mind your own business, lady. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm not completely anti-data, I'm not completely anti-technology, but what I am is informed consent, being aware of the ways that people can use these things, because basically, a lot of people profit from ignorance. And a lot of people can make a lot of money off of you being stupid and lazy or ignorant, and I don't really think that's fair. So what I think is appropriate is for people to be aware of what is happening with their own personal information and for them to have the power over it, which upsets a lot of people who are making money off of you not knowing things. So what we want to think about is data a tool that people have that they can control about their own selves? Or is data a control mechanism? Is it something that folks want to use to basically, inflict their designs upon the populace? And I'll talk about that in a second. So you heard that I'm from Hillsdale College. It's a little liberal arts school out in Michigan. So over there we like to be intellectual. And so I learned a little bit of philosophy while I was there. And so I'm going to talk a little bit of philosophy because what I'm going to do is just basically, people do things because of bigger ideas that they have motivating them, right? So if you think, I'm going to be a teacher in life, you don't probably think I want to be in charge of a group of 30 screaming children, who have all kinds of problems. You think, I want to serve someone, right? You have a greater goal in mind, you have kind of a big picture thing that matters to you, something that is valuable and important to you, that's kind of your mission, your reason that motivates you to do a certain thing. So when people are excited about big data or excited about technology, yeah, part of it's just for the whiz-bang effect, but also there's some there's some philosophy that's motivating them. So I want to talk about it because I think when we talk about it, it helps us take it apart, it helps us understand what's going on and think about whether we agree or not. So again, we can either make informed consent or we can say to them, like, I disagree and here's why. So you can make an informed argument either way. So let's see here. My husband is actually a lot more philosophical than I am, so I had to have his help out a little bit of this because I'm more of a concrete thinker. He's really good at abstract things and I have trouble multiplying basic numbers. So, The Enlightenment was basically a period of time that brought about the modern world, the way that we think about doing things. And so that was right around the American Revolution and following. And there was this philosopher fellow called David Hume. This is hopefully, obviously, a statue of him. So he departed from traditional thinking to say that basically all the knowledge that we get from our senses. So basically, science is the only path to truth. We can't know things from tradition, we can't know things from religion, we can't know things from our feelings. We can only know things by testing them, by subjecting them to the empirical method. So that's a really popular idea nowadays. You can see that everywhere. And so this is an article by a young lady writing in kind of a scientific technological publication. And she says, if the big data fundamentalists argue that more data is inherently better or closer to the truth, then there is no point in their theology at which enough is enough. So for example, if you think that the only way to know anything is through information, data points, knowledge, then there is no limit to the amount of knowledge that you want to gather, right? Because the more equals good. Always, limitless, appetiteless, you know. The more data you can collect, the better it is, because the better that you can fine-tune your systems, they'll be more applicable to the way things are. So this is a really popular thought among big data folks. So when they talk about, for example, the human workforce pipeline or making colleges churn out what the economy is looking for, what they basically are saying is we want to centrally plan society. We think that we can gather enough information in order to be able to plan, rather than letting people spontaneously plan their own lives and interact with each other through free markets and free societies and free association. We think that we have a better way. We think we can get enough information through science that feed it all into our computers and spit out the answer, and then we will know the right way to tell everybody what to do all the time. Obviously, I'm a little biased against this approach. So you can actually see some examples of this in art. So Pablo Picasso, a lot of folks complain about modern art because it's hard to understand. You look at that and you don't think, that's beautiful. The colors are gorgeous, right? But I don't look at that and think it's beautiful. Some people who are probably a lot more erudite and informed and snobby than I am might think that's beautiful. But I think the average person looks at that and thinks it's really strange. But what it was is a reflection, a visual reflection of the idea that science is the only knowledge that we can really know for sure. And he, in fact, said that himself. I'm not making this up. This is some weird interpretation of me sitting there pondering, the thing and coming out with my dissertation on Pablo Picasso. He said himself that his goal in painting like this, because actually Pablo Picasso could paint beautiful, gorgeous, realistic things. They have several examples of that. But he chose to instead paint this way, in this kind of mechanical form, because he was expressing the idea of the age, related to David Hume, that you can reduce human beings to mathematics, to geometry, to planes, to hard facts, to hard science. So Cubism, he's of course one of the prime examples of that style of art, they're using grids to reveal reality. They're taking a system and pushing it on the world. They're making it neat and orderly and tidy on your behalf. And so the result looks like this, and I think it looks like that in society as well when we try the same thing. Here's my favorite philosopher of all, by which I mean possibly the deadliest philosopher of all, since he inspired Nazism. Friedrich Nietzsche believed his big idea was the will to power. So it basically means there is no truth. He famously said, God is dead. So if there is no truth, if there is no reality outside yourself, all that is left is will, what you want, your passions, your desires. And so then the only way to arbitrate or decide between, so if my children, one child wants the truck and the other one wants the same truck, there is no right? It didn't belong to one of them first. It isn't one's toy or the other one didn't have it first. No, that's imposing your external truth upon the situation. The right way for the children to decide, or the parents to decide who gets it, is to let them fight it out, and whoever's more powerful one wins. Survival of the fittest. Again, will to power. So what you will, whatever you can impose upon people, that is right. So why this man is popular, I'm really not sure, because that sounds really terrible to me. But he is powerful and extremely influential. Because if you divorce the world from an objective morality outside of us, right? Again, how do you adjudicate? How do you have people come together and say, I think this way, which one of us is going to win? Well, you basically resort to mass force, and so that's what democratic politics has become, right? Whoever shows up in the most numbers wins. Whoever shows up and lobbies their lawmakers hard enough, gives them enough money, they win, right? So there isn't an objective standard of our laws say you must do A, B, and C. No, it's will to power. I've decided, so I'm going to write an executive order, and that's the law. You know, all the other laws against it be damned. So this relates to big data how? It basically relates to the fact that information is power. So if you have a lot of information about people, you can predict their behavior, you can predict their patterns, you know how people are likely to act, you're able to psychologically manipulate them, you know, generically of course, and sometimes even specifically. If you can collect the information about the patterns of their specific brain or just people's brains in general, then you're able to manipulate them. So that information gives you power, and then again, you use that power to further your own desires to control, I mean, the world, your world, you know, maybe your specific sphere, or however, you know, much power you can gain. Okay, so now we're going to move from the little philosophy lesson to talking about this more in the concrete, some examples, how this applies to real life. So there are three things that I think people need to understand. Data is inseparable from everyday life. There's no way of getting completely off the grid. Even if you go off the grid, you have to pay taxes. The government already has your social security number. You've already been through all of the stoplight cameras and so forth. They've got a geometric grid of your face. You know, I've been through so many airports. I'm sure, you know, Interpol has, you know, even if I grew a beard, which I don't really know how that would happen. You know, I mean, if I wore glasses, they've got it, right? So I can't hide, and you can't really hide either, unless maybe in North Dakota there's a couple of you who have never driven on major highways or been through an airport, and I guess you're safe. Now the rest of us, well, we're hosed. Okay, we're on the grid. The second thing is data is inseparable from government money. So basically the government agencies have been on a mission of expanding the data collected about everybody all the time for decades. So we're going to talk about that specifically in education and how it relates to Common Core. But that's true everywhere. Healthcare is true about, you know, financial aspects, the economy, everything that the government can get information on you about, it has been expanding and connecting. And the third thing to talk about, of course, is that data is inseparable from Common Core. So I'm going to link all of this all of these different things because data is itself a huge, huge topic, but it is also inextricably linked to Common Core. It's not severable. Folks will talk about Common Core and say, well, you know, we can get out of the testing. We can, you know, Common Core isn't data, it's just a set of standards. Yes, well, the standards are intended to structure data, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so the question then is not whether there's going to be big data. The question is not whether you and your children are going to produce big data, because you already are, especially if you use a computer. The question is not whether you and your children will produce it, it's who is going to control it. Will you control the things that you own and that you generate, or will other people control the things that you own and that you generate? Right now, other people control the things that you own and generate. So for example, I use Gmail. Gmail has the right and does scan through every single email I have ever sent from that account, and I have used it for about a decade now, so it's basically all the emails of my entire life. And I mean, and that is their right, because it's a free service, so it's not really free. I am trading Gmail the ability to have an email service for their ability to sift through all my emails and do whatever they like with it. So we are often not aware that's the trade that we're making, right? Facebook. Facebook is such a data mine, right? Because they not only can get, you know, the things that you talk about and the people that you talk to, but they can get, I mean, you tell it who is your aunt, you tell them who are your children, you tell them who your pets are, you tell them where you're going for Christmas, you tell them what movies and books you like, you tell them, you know, everything. So if we don't talk about completely free, right? No, data sells your information to marketers. That's why you see all these weird ads on the side of your screen. I always get ones for like sexy singles in cities I don't live in. I don't really think their data profile is really good quite yet. But some of them, they've been getting actually a lot better. You know, so if I look for something on Amazon, I think, oh well, you know, it's not in the budget, or I'm not really sure I want to buy it. So for example, I bought my daughter an American Girl baby doll for Christmas. So I think it's kind of an outrageous amount of money to spend, but I have like this sentimental thing about American Girl because I grew up with the doll, so I bought her one. And I have never stopped seeing American Girl ads ever since. So, I mean, they know what's going on in our house. And so from that, anyway, from the information, you know, they know I have probably a little girl in my house who likes dolls, which is absolutely true. Okay, so here's some examples of some common things that are collecting data about you that you would think of but you don't. So here's one of my ones that I get kind of black helicopter about. It's these reward cards. My husband thinks it's super awesome that that our Kroger card, we have Kroger grocery stores in Indiana. I don't know if you have those around here. But my husband thinks it's super awesome that Kroger tracks all of our grocery buying habits through our shopper card and sends us coupons for the specific items that we buy. You know, he thinks, great, man, this saves us 20 bucks a month. And I think, they know everything I'm buying. He's like, what's the big deal? It's carrots and sour cream, you know? And so he thinks it's a worthy trade. That's fine. I think people, I mean, but really, what are they going to do with my sour cream buying habits? I mean, the only real problem would be if the government got involved and started saying, like, giving you anti-coupons, right? Like, you weigh too much. You're not allowed to buy chips anymore. I'm like, what? It's my birthday. You know what I mean? I had a broke up with my boyfriend. Whatever, you know. So that's when I would get creepy, because what's Kroger can do to you? They want you to buy more stuff. Anyway, so moving on to the tablets. I don't know if I mentioned this later in the presentation, but a fellow who works installing technology in schools, in public schools in Georgia, told me that people have no idea what those tablets can collect, by which he means they can collect a lot and people don't know it. So for example, your child's fingerprints, use touch screen, they can pick that up. Temperature, they can pick up temperature. They can, if they have a camera on the front of them, which most of them do, they can follow eye tracking movements. They know where your child is looking, when and how long. They can track facial expressions. So if your child is reading something, who knows what, something slightly political, something disgusting, something about, you know, human biology, whatever, and makes a weird face, it can pick it up. They're also remotely controlled. So for example, there's this young man, I think he is a high school junior, he's in Minnesota, and all of the kids in his school were issued a laptop recently, and so they're all handed with it this little, like, sign away all your privacy form. So he actually read it. Amazing thing for a 16-year-old. He said, I'm not signing this. And they basically said, well, you have to sign this because you cannot get your homework assignments without a computer. He said, forget that, I'm not doing it, so he took them to court. But, I mean, so he read it, and basically what it said is that the school district is allowed to not only, track the browsing history for every student, you know, forever. They can, like, find its location data, so wherever the child takes it anytime. There are lawsuits and cases about the fact that school districts have turned on the cameras, you know, in people's homes. So, I mean, they can do that remotely, they control it remotely. There's this story, there's a lot of, this is a really popular thing for nasty young men to do online, is actresses or just attractive young girls, they'll turn, you know, you keep your laptop in your bedroom, right? You usually leave the thing open. They can turn on the camera without, you know, and they can turn it on without that little light going on. They take naked pictures of the girl, they blackmail her, you know, they say, I'm gonna put this on your Facebook unless you do A, B, and C, this, that, and the other. So that got a lot more public when they did it to one actress, and she said, forget you, I don't care, I'm going to the police. But most, you know, young girls aren't going to be that bold, especially you're 15, you think, oh my gosh, you know, I'm going to be naked on the internet for everybody to see. Xbox, oh my goodness, this one creeps me out. So the new Xbox can track the heart rates, the movements, and the voice prints of up to 6 people in the room that it sits in. It can track your movements, your skeletal structure, your posture, you know, see, I'm not even kidding. Look this up. It's all online. It's not like a secret or anything. They think this is really great because it's going to change gaming. Again, obviously your cell phone. Your cell phone knows where you've been, everywhere you've ever carried it. Your cell phone company has a record of that, and thanks to the NSA wiretapping, so does the federal government. They have a record of what number you've ever called in your whole entire life. They have a number of how long you talked to them. They have all of your texts. Mine has emails. It's a lot of very private information that's just being collected through us living our daily lives. Okay, so this lady is a professor, I think at Stanford University. So she got pregnant and she decided, well, pregnancy data she knew is worth about 5 times as much to marketers as just a normal person's basic profile. So she wanted to see if she could hide it from the internet. So she didn't post it on Facebook, she didn't talk about it over email. When somebody, one of her uncle's messengers said, hey, congratulations on the baby, she deleted his post and blocked it and called him up and said, don't write anything about it, I'm trying this experiment. She and her husband had to go to different drugstores to buy different gift cards to buy baby items so that they didn't put it on their credit cards. She basically was like, we acted like a bunch of drug laundering mafia people, just to not let the internet know they were having a baby. It wasn't worth all of the trouble. So there was a Time article about all of the really ridiculous things that she went to just to keep what is really, I mean, a personal thing, right? You're pregnant, that's your business, it's your, you know, and you decide to tell your family and so forth. But when you reveal that, how you reveal that, whether you want ads coming to you, I mean, I feel like people should be able to have a little more control over that, rather than, again, having to act like you're a drug laundering criminal. Oh, okay. So again, I really like this. So here's some random data facts. Google earns, I'm an English major, so I should have spotted that one. Google earns an extra $200 million each year by having found the exact right shade of blue to use for its ad links. So they did this thing called A/B testing. It's really popular in the internet world. My brother is a social media person, and what they do is they try two different things so say 2 different headlines for the same article. Whatever one's getting more clicks, they delete the one that's not getting more clicks and make it all, you know, the one that is working more. So Google did that, of course, with its ad colors. So they tried out a bunch of different shades of blue, and they ultimately got to the one that earned them a lot more money just by being the right shade of blue. And here's one of my favorite things. I also like to point out how big data is really flawed. So in 2012 and 2013, Google flew trends, which was really popular the year before because they were saying, oh my gosh, you know, this could change how we think about world health because people doing Google searches for flu things, you know, can kind of tell you where it seems to be moving, right? Because the symptoms will appear on the Google searches faster than they will, you know, the records of people having visited the doctor and gotten medication or whatever. But the only problem with that is that, well, they found out that it vastly overestimated the amount of people who got the flu by 73%. So, you know, you think, oh, big data solves this, not really at all. Okay. So if you remember, of course, the Boston bombing, where, you know, there were folks who made a homemade bomb with a pressure cooker and they put in a backpack. So this family, mom happened to be searching for a pressure cooker, and her husband happened to be searching for a backpack using the same, you know, internet system in their house. And the police knocked on their door, you know, and had, you know, they received a visit from the police just because they had happened to make a suspicious Google search. So obviously, again, I kind of feel like, I mean, I suppose you're trading Google searches for the things that you search for, but it's a little eerie when, you know, a completely innocuous, what you think is a private search, you know, has police coming to your door and asking you questions. Okay. So here's where I mean, there's a lot of folks who are worried about data privacy who are on the left. I think it's pretty obvious that I'm a conservative, and I don't have a problem telling people that, and it's fine if other people are not. But the reason that I don't worry or get really hot under the collar about companies so much as I do the government having my data is that companies cannot kill you. So the worst thing that that a company is going to do is send you a coupon, you know, or an offer in the mail. They're not going to show up at your door, policeman, officer with guns, you know, asking you questions about your Google searches, okay? So one of those is threatening, the other one is, you know, maybe weird. So I think that information mining gets dangerous when it's combined with the coercive power of government, especially in these cases where we see there's a lot of trial and error here, right? So if we had government sending health officials to people's doors based on their estimate of the flu population, that would get a lot, I mean, really weird to me really quickly, as opposed to, again, you know, coupons, you know, annoying ads of sexy singles in Dallas showing up on the side of your screen. So again, the worst case scenario that I've ever heard of occurring in the private sector was sending ads to rape victims for self-defense courses. They had found a list of like ladies who had listed, you know, their rape with the State Department of Ed, so they all, you know, sent them. That's awfully tacky, right? Very tacky. So you're thinking that's a sensitive issue, right? But again, the worst thing that's going to happen to that woman is she's going to have, you know, she's going to possibly have, you know, some time of grief thinking about that. That's a sensitive issue, but she can throw that in the trash. It's done. It's over. You know, the end. So the difference, of course, here is with the NSA or the IRS. So they can actually put you in jail and hold you there and question you about things and intimidate you and so on and so forth. The IRS, well, they can run you through the ringer. They can make you give you every receipt you ever generated in your entire lifetime. They can make you pay thousands and thousands of dollars in legal bills without charging you with anything, just investigating. So, I mean, again, that's a lot different from sending an ad for, you know, come to our self-defense class. And again, what happens when a president or senator gets friendly with Google and gets his message prime viewing for searches? We don't know yet, but we know that the computer algorithms can do that. And again, I'm not really sure that I'm against, I mean, Google is a private company. If they want to select somebody's, you know, searches to get more viewership, I suppose I wouldn't have a problem with them doing that as long as the public knew it was happening. But it's creepy, right? It's a lot of power that we're giving them. Okay, Now let's move from general data to data in education. So remember with this, the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules, and the government has a lot of your gold, and it's making a lot of the rules. In fact, it's making all the rules. Okay, so here are 3 things that the federal government, major things, there are a lot of things the federal government has done. Here are 3 things the federal government has done related to big data and education. First of all, they have for decades been bribing states. I call it bribes because what they do is they take your tax money, they launder it through a bunch of officials up in Washington, paying them their nice little $150,000 a year with $40,000 benefit packages. I'm not kidding. To decide what kind of rules you should have in your life. And then they send all these, the 40% of that money back to you, back to your state, and they say you get your people's money back if you do what we say. So that's basically, so I call it bribery. I think it's bribery because it's really not constitutional for the feds to march around telling people what to do with data. So they get around it by the really Supreme Court expanded taxation ability. So by which, again, tax your money and they give it back to you after having taken a large cut, only if you do what they say in order to get your own bloomin' money back. Okay. So there is a federal ban against a national student database, but what the federal government has done over the past several decades, given every, I think it's actually 47 of the states, your money, to build what they call a Student Longitudinal Database System, SLDS, SLEDS. And so that just basically means a child tracker. And so again, it's illegal to have a national child database. So what they've done is to get around that by saying, well, we're going to have state-run databases, state-created databases, but they have to be all interoperable, able to share data, and using the same, general systems. So it's basically a de facto database, national database, but it's technically not. So, well, they think they're covering the rear end that way. Okay. Second thing that they've done, they've bribed states to. Oh, I've mentioned this. So they have to link all their databases. So those contracts, those agreements with states that include the federal money for those databases have included requirements that states link their databases. So not just should you create an education database that tracks all the kids in your state, but you want to connect the data from that between education and your healthcare system, education and social services, education in the justice system, so on and so forth. There's a lot of different government systems. Education in the workforce is a big one, right? So you have this information about what kind of industries you have in your state, so what kind of income people are making, so they're tracking that. So they call that, basically it creates a birth to death dossier, about people. So for example, my home state of Indiana, I have 3 children. So we moved there from Maryland when my oldest child was almost 1 year old. And I received a letter from the state, about 6 months after we moved in, saying, your son is not up to date on his vaccinations. I was like, what are you talking about? I called my doctor up and she said, ignore them, they're always behind, they don't have any idea. The real issue is that your child got most of his vaccinations in Maryland, and the state has no record of that having happened, but I have it on file in our office, it's fine, so on and so forth. But the point being, and then when I had my second child, she was born in Indiana, it's mandatory, state law. In fact, this is now a national mandatory federal law. Your child has the heel stick, little pieces of blood on the paper. They send it in, to the state, and they check for genetic diseases. Which, look, as a parent, I would like to know that. I want to get my child the earliest treatment possible. But the only problem with that is now that they're keeping that child's DNA forever. They're supposed to destroy it. I checked a little thing saying, destroy this, it's none of your beeswax. Once you figure out if my child is sick or not, you don't need it anymore. Well, they didn't do that, and they're not going to do that anymore. Michelle Bachmann, you can go, find her YouTube video where she's protesting against this law that just passed, that they're creating a national DNA depository of children's blood heel sticks. So the government has your child's DNA, or is going to be collecting the DNA of every citizen. What it's going to do with that, I don't know, and I don't really think it's any of its business. They always say, oh, we're doing this for medical research, but I'm like, look, it's my blood, my kid's blood. It's his genetic information, which is unique to him. You get his permission when he is 18 years old to get that. Otherwise, go get your sticky fingers to yourself. Anyway, now I'm going on a tangent, getting to like my cranky mom mode. You start touching my babies and they start getting a little weird. Okay. So, some states are farther along at linking all their databases together. than others, and some are really, far behind. Luckily, Indiana is really far behind, so I'm really glad about that. But they're really excited to get up, catch up to everyone else. So I'm really not grateful for their attitude about that. Something else that they call these database linkages is P20W councils or systems. So that means P in Oregon. There is a video of the Assistant Superintendent of Instruction on YouTube, which I have also downloaded in case it doesn't appear on YouTube anymore. He says the P stands for prenatal. In his video, he's talking about how it is the government's responsibility to check up on children in the womb, make sure the mother is getting appropriate nutrition. Okay, I mean, I have been pregnant. Again, do I want, my friendly little neighborhood government officials showing up at my door and asking to do a blood test to make sure I have enough nutrients in my blood for my child? Okay. I'm not really a violent person, but that is really a little too far. Like, when did we start living in China? Okay, moving on. So the third big thing that the federal government has done is rewritten through regulatory rewrite. This is where we call those, I don't care what the law says, will to power, do whatever I want because I say so, sort of things. The Obama administration, I believe it was 2010, rewrote federal student privacy law. So there is this law called the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA. Sometimes I get that acronym wrong, but if you Google FERPA, you'll find it very easily. It's the only federal student privacy law. So basically, the Obama administration we'll get into the Common Core bit in a little bit, but it couldn't get the data it was trying to generate without basically shifting a little bit, playing a little loose with the language, kind of like they, say in Pirates of the Caribbean. They consider the law a little more like guidelines, aka they don't exist at all. So what the new law says, which is contrary to the written text of the law, is that any education agency or outpost of a local school district, any contractor that the local school district or the State Department of Ed or the Federal Department of Education or the Department of Labor, any of those folks that they have authorized is free to share a child's information that they have collected without parent knowledge or consent. So they get information about your child, which they do. I mean, they have to. They have to write down his name, his test score, his grade. Then there's obviously some basic things schools need to have on record about children. Is he allergic to aspirin? Is it okay? Do we have permission for this field trip, right? So, but all of that sort of information, they are now free to share without ever telling you. Doesn't that make you feel comfortable? Okay. So there's this thing called the National Education Data Model, and it's from the National Center for Education Statistics, which is kind of like the research and data arm of the U.S. Department of Education. It provides a template for state data collection. So I have read through a lot of these state contracts with the federal government for their student longitudinal databases, and a number of them that I have found say that we are basically using this model to pattern our data system after. Because the idea, again, is to have them all alike so that they can talk to each other, so they're interoperable. If they're really different, it's kind of like having two different kind of programming codes, right? They can't talk to each other, they can't use the data. It makes them unhappy because they can't have their nice little national education data system. So this contains 416 data points that could be collected about any given individual. They include religion. I mean, I have seen this with my own eyes. I have screenshots. I have a friend who's a researcher has copied down, the whole thing. If any of you want it, happy to send it to you. In fact, you can just Google for this and you can find it. It's kind of a little tricky, to go look around for the drop-down menus. But if you're persistent for really only about 3 minutes, you'll find all of this in there. It includes religion. It includes not only just religion, but it includes like the specific religions that might be possible. Assemblies of God, Mormon, Roman Catholic, Orthodox Catholic, non-denominational is very specific. It's not just, generic Christian, Jewish, Muslim. It's very specific, all the way down to denomination. Health insurance, medical conditions, family income, bus stop time. So your child's, I'm just thinking, so if I'm a pervy hacker, right, and I know what the bus stop places and times are for every single child in the system that I'm getting access to. It includes all their extracurricular activities and their voting status. So like whether they're registered to vote. And there's really a very small percentage of 18-year-olds that are attending, K-12 schools, so it's really weird that they have it in there, and like, why do they need to know? I don't know, but they have it in there. So These are 3 states that I have read through their contracts with the federal government, and it actually, it includes Michigan, and there's a number of other ones that I have found since. But they said, they told the federal government, this is the template, we're going to use your template, thanks for giving it to us. Oh, this is our friend, Oregon Deputy Superintendent Rob Saxon, who was talking about prenatalism. So here's his quote. He urged people to think about education from the time that a woman is pregnant, so prenatal, and just like what their nutrition looks like, what their exercise looks like. Thanks, I really need you to be logging my exercise patterns. What kind of education we can provide working around the child. Okay. So, when people talk about education data, when you bring concerns like this to people who work in education data, so the State Department of Education officials, they will tell you, and your lawmakers and your school district officials, well, it doesn't matter because all of this information we're collecting about kids, it's not attached to their name. We use a student ID number. It's anonymous, it's randomized. Well, either they're ignorant or they're deceiving you deliberately because student ID numbers are not an identity cloak. It is very easy to take 2 different data sets and match them. And we've known this since the 90s because they've been doing it, since the 90s. And databases are everywhere. So here are some examples in the private sector. Netflix, 2006. They released 500,000 movie reviews with the usernames removed. So these are just the text of the username. I think they include the timestamp. So a Stanford team identified the users who had given those reviews with almost 100% accuracy using timestamps and reviews from another website. They know who you are even if you think you're being anonymous. These people are using usernames for the love of Pete. In 1999, there was a Kentucky NAEP study there's a biannual, every 2 years test from the federal government called the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's a good test, it's well respected. They did a study. They had a problem. Kentucky was fudging its numbers. On their state test, they said that kids were doing so spectacularly well, and then they came along and said, yeah, your kids are not doing well at all. So to kind of say what's the problem here, what they looked at were the different rates of what they call exclusions. So what basically happened was the state test took a bunch of kids who were not likely to perform well on the test and said, you don't have to take the test. So kids who are English language learners, kids who have disabilities, just didn't give the test to them. So the testing pool looked a lot better, than the testing pool for the NAEP, which has a lot fewer exclusions. So in order to kind of see what the testing data should have been, if they had included all those kids, they had to do some data matching. So NAEP does not collect student ID number, or it doesn't collect student names, social security numbers, any other really type identifier. They just collect student ID numbers and a couple of other basic data points. I think there's 7 of them. It includes not their age, so not even their birthday, their grade level. It includes their family income status because it's important to people to know, poverty level, not poverty level, and include their test scores. So those researchers, by just comparing those 2 databases without student names, social security numbers, even birth dates, they got an 87% match of test scores between the kids. They knew who those kids were 87% of the time with just those 7 data points. So data matching has gotten a lot better in the last 15 years. And believe me, the federal government requires far more than 7 data points about every child to be sent all the way up to them. So student ID numbers are a total myth. It's not going to protect anybody. As you see, I call this the U.S. Department of Ed is getting weird. So I was also one of the first people, I think the first person to report on this study from 2013, calling, something about pertinacity, grit, and tenacity from the U.S. Department of Education. I have a link here, happy to send it to anyone. So it basically is talking about new ways of collecting information about children and evaluating them, new ways of testing them. So it included exciting reviews of equipment used to watch children while they're being assessed, including a facial expression camera. This is like a copy and paste from the report. A posture analysis seat, so the child wiggling, kind of shifting around, slumping, they're tracking that, pressure mouse, is the child gripping it tightly? Where does he move that mouse around the screen? And a wireless skin conductance sensor. Is he sweating? Is he kind of heating up? Is he feeling nervous? Is his heart rate increasing? So let me be clear, they were not talking about applying this to all children in every school in the country. They were talking about exciting ways to study children's reactions during taking different kinds of tests, and also different kinds of reactions to begin measuring from children. But I don't know about you, but I don't think that's okay either. I don't think my children's faces need to be tracked for any reason whatsoever, or their posture, or how much they're sweating, how much they're nervous. It's just weird. I can tell if my kid is nervous by talking to him, but I realize these people can't talk to your child. They don't know his name. Never met him in his life. They only care about him for his data. Okay, last thing. How does Common Core relate to all of this? Well, as I said earlier, they're inextricably linked. There's no severance between Common Core and big data. So the first thing to understand is I take people at their word, especially when they're signing legal documents, and the memorandum of understanding that the nation's governor signed, which I'm not sure is really illegal because you can't pass laws by signing a contract. You have to do this little thing called passing a bill through a legislature that has elected representatives. Nevertheless, the memorandum of understanding that governor signed to kick off Common Core, to agree, yes, we'll do Common Core 2 years before we even know what it is. It says that Common Core includes tests. It's not just standards, it is standards and assessments. That's what they themselves have said. David Pullmann, he's known as the architect of Common Core. He was one of the 5 lead writers of Common Core. He is now in charge of the College Board, which runs the SAT and advanced placement classes. He admitted in a conversation to HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association President Michael Ferris, that other people have seized the opportunity to make a centralized data collection effort through the implementation of Common Core. His own words. He said he didn't appreciate it, but he also says this happened. Okay. Now the third issue is going to take a little bit of explaining. Common Core is also a taxonomy. So a taxonomy is kind of like a system of classification, right? So if you remember from chemistry class, King, Philip, right up for goodness sake, kingdom, phylum, let's see, class, order, so on and so forth. A taxonomy is a way of classifying things. So in the scientific world, right, we have, these big groupings of things that, smaller groupings and so on and so forth. So when we talk about, say, the Latin name for a plant or an animal, and we're talking about just those last 2 most minute classifications. It's a way of understanding where things fit in the ecosystem of things. So they also have these things in programming language, right? They have basically an organizing system. I like to think of it as kind of like a file cabinet. It tells you where things are, where they fit. So Common Core is specifically designed to be one of those things for education data. So what happens when folks are writing curriculum, especially online curriculum, what they're doing is taking down to the line, down to sometimes even the word of text inside the textbook, inside the online, down to the specific moment or the screen of a video they're showing the child. They're tagging it to specific things related to Common Core. So say there's some portion of Common Core that's 3rd grade reading standard number 14. You go into a 3rd grade reading textbook, and that certain sentence of text, someone will have linked it to 3rd grade reading standard number 14. So it's basically a way of classifying. And so what you do is, so if you go through a test, each testing item, the way that the child answers it, a computer can analyze. This one relates to this specific standard, this one relates to that specific standard. So you can basically have this map of this Common Core sort of map of the knowledge a child has inside his head. And Common Core is kind of an organizing scheme for that. So you can say, he got this question right about standard number 27. He got this question wrong about standard number 14, right? And then you can follow him over the course of his entire career and see how many times he missed a question about standard number 14, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, it's an organizing principle. It's a way of taking all the information that kids have learned in class and again, organizing it, classifying it. So you have kind of a picture of the child's brain according to Common Core. And again, it's designed to be that way. It's designed to interoperate with the digital items on purpose, okay? So this is one of the ways where you just think, you can't take Common Core, technology out of Common Core. It's specifically designed to make technology, make data make sense to people, to help them organize it according to their scheme of thinking about the world. Excuse me. So item number 4, tests. So both of the testing organizations, Common Core National and Smarter Balance, or SBAC and PARC, have in their contracts with the federal government, again, you want chapter and verse, I can cite them to you, show it to you, page number 485, footnote 2. They have agreed that they will provide the federal government student level data. So when people come to you and they say, we are not sending the federal government specific information about Johnny Smith. Well, your contract with the federal government says that you are. And they'll say, we're giving aggregate data, right? Piles of information about, the whole 3rd grade class from Prairie Elementary. Well, then what is this little part about where you promise to give student level data to the federal government? Because that's what they specifically provide. And in fact, they have to do that because the 2 Common Core testing providers are linking their databases together so they can compare kids across the whole entire country. There's also some question overlap in there. So I'm not really sure that, I think the tests, from what they've said themselves, are a lot more different in style than they are in specifically content. Again, they're designed to be interoperable, and that's something that they've told the feds, by the way, who gave them all their startup funds, $360 million, to do. So, and then the last item, the last connection point is the philosophical alignment. So Common Core is envisioned, as you've all heard this phrase probably 5 billion times, college and career readiness, right? That's what everybody wants of our children. We want them to be ready to jump onto that hamster wheel. So there's a philosophical alignment because the idea is that we need the data about the children, right? We need to be able to put them in the right career track in 6th grade. We need to know where they're going to end up from their trajectory. We need to know if they're on track to get a watered-down community college credential that really qualifies them to graduate from 4th grade. So there's a philosophical alignment to folks who basically view children as, workforce production engines. Again, we're talking about if we don't think about, you're not able to know and be anything else than a mechanical animal, right? There's no values, there's no religion, there's no morality, there's no way of knowing other than facts, than basically being a beast who likes to read books. Anyway, so there's a huge philosophical alignment to use education as a theater into a centrally planned economy, because what you hear all the time is, well, we need to align education with our workforce system. And I think, so is it the government supposed to align the workforce system? I thought people were supposed to align their own workforce system, right? So I say, this job offers $20,000 a year, and this one offers $80,000, and I could probably be good enough at doing both. It might be worth it to me to take $20,000 because I want to have the summers home with my kids. I want to work part-time. Or, look, I want $80,000 a year. I want a cabin. I want to send my kids to private school. Whatever. That's my judgment to make. At least that's my humble opinion. And people should be able to, because there's basically 2 ways of operating the economy, right? You can have individuals planning, freely associating, saying, I'll give you this if you give me that. Deal. No deal, right? Or you can have the government saying, well, you can't actually make that deal because we've decided that 2 people, who make that deal are really stupid. We're just going to get in the way of you right here and define what your actions can be. We don't want you to choose to be, I don't know, we don't want you to choose to be a pastor. We don't want you to choose to be a mother. How is that producing anything for the global economy? We want you to choose to be, I'm not going to start being really mean here. We want you to choose to be producing with every ounce of all of your fiber something tangible, that we can measure and use our little calipers on all the time. I don't know, it's just annoying to me how the almighty dollar is like the measure of everything to them, right? That's all right, we're almost done. All right, that's the last one. Good. Okay, I'm going to run through this and then it'll be open for questions. So I mentioned earlier, states are creating data systems. I'm just giving you proof that I'm not like some crazy liar. So the memorandums of agreement that states have signed with the federal government, and this is a quote from them, say that each participating state in Common Core tests will conduct periodic reviews of its state laws, regulations, and policies to identify any barriers to implementing the proposed assessment system and address any such barriers. You know what this sounds like to me if we just translate the education needs? We'll change our state law if you want. Anything that's in the way of these tests, go ahead and tell us what it is and we'll make sure our lawmakers get in line. Okay? So the state data systems give the information about the children to the National Common Core testing organizations. I mean, the testing organizations, they can't function without getting information about kids, obviously, right? They have to get test responses, some sort of identifier for whose test responses they are. Okay, so the state databases are open to PARC and Smarter Balance, these 2 Common Core testing groups. they have promised to provide them unspecified student level data. So basically, we'll give you student level data, but they haven't said, here's exactly what we will and will not give you. We don't know. And then lastly, the Common Core tests have promised the federal government they have open access to any information that they have.
What do you mean?
Oh, you're fine. So, and here is a quote from their agreement with the federal government. PARC and Smarter Balance have agreed to give the federal government timely and complete access to any and all data collected at the state level to the federal government and any organizations the federal government designate. So I call this the data pipeline because this is another kind of like fancy way to get around admitting to you that the feds are getting your direct student data, or at least it is legally open for them to be able to do so. Because states are not directly giving that to the federal government, oh no. They're giving it to the Common Core testing agencies who are the middleman to give it to the federal government. So that allows folks to go up to you with a straight face and say, we are not giving any information to the federal government student level data. It is all aggregate. Well, I'm sorry, Buster, you didn't read your own 1,200-page agreement with the federal government, but it says otherwise. And again, I tend to believe folks when they are writing 1,200-page documents they don't think anyone else can read. Okay, last thing to talk about is that Common Core examines behavior. People think of tests as measuring, basic things. Can Johnny read? Can he add? Common Core is examining a lot more than that about your child. The GRIT report I cited earlier notes that Common Core math standards require measuring persistence. Happens to be a character trait. Common Core is full of what they call 21st century skills. Sometimes these are called communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. Very vague ways. I don't know how you would grade this, right? You have no idea. I mean, you can grade. Can the child add two-digit numbers? Yes or no? Can you grade creativity? Right? How do you do that? One of many examples. So here is a kindergarten scenario. Just start at the beginning. Children are required to participate in collaborative conversations about grade-appropriate topics and texts with peers and adults in small and larger groups. Have you ever met a kindergartner? Do they ever talk about age-appropriate topics with adults? If you're really lucky if you can get them to answer a question straight without giggling or looking strange. I mean, at that age, anyway. But it's kind of an example of totally not understanding children. And then kind of putting this lens of workforceness, and you can just see them in their little business suits around the table with their agenda items, right? I don't know. Have you ever seen a 5-year-old? You would realize that's crazy. Okay, Smarter Balance has said, this is again a quote in this contract from the federal government, with the federal government. They said they might measure self-management skills, such as time management, goal setting, self-awareness, persistence, and study skills. Have you ever seen surveys about those? They're typical kind of, study sorts of things that people do on schools. They're things like, do you turn in your homework on time? Do you enjoy school? Let's see here. Do you get up in the morning at a time appropriate enough to get to school with, all your things in order? So it's kind of like, is my school doing my job as a parent? Yeah, pretty much. That's what they think it's supposed to be doing. Okay. So, this is a quote from Virginia Eubanks from American Prospect, and I found it inspiring. She said, "We resist things like these data collection efforts because surveillance is not just about privacy. It's about power, control, self-determination, and autonomy." So I'm going to circle back to the beginning where I talked about I'm not anti-government, I'm not anarchist, I'm not anti-technology, but what I am is for people having power over their own lives, over them, being invited, not only invited, but assumed to be the person making decisions about your own life. And so right now, lots of people are making decisions on your behalf, and I don't know that all of them are making the decisions that you would make if you actually were able to do that yourself. So the reason that I talk about data and push for people to have privacy laws that basically say, I call them privacy rights laws. Any data that I or my child generate, any information about me, it's mine. It's like a property. It's my property, right? So I made it, it belongs to me, and so I should be able to say consent to uses of it or not. And people, again, you're free to say to Kroger, I'll trade, my shopping habits for 20 bucks of coupons in a month. I was going to say cartoons, I'm like, no, but you should make that as an informed decision that you have made. Not the government saying, all right, everyone's opted into this Kroger program because Kroger happened to give our senators a lot of nice donations in the last cycle, yada, yada, yada. So the force and the coercion and the secrecy is what I'm against. And I don't think that it needs to be that way. So now I'm open for questions, and if somebody has my little boy and he's getting fussy, you're welcome to bring him out too.
He's good. He might have to make some copies.
Okay.